Hello, friend. The mystical American Patriots Society is transmitting to you from beneath 4 million cubic feet of solid granite, in the burning heart of the Yellowstone caldera. This is a variety program for normal sandwich-eating Americans with some concerns about living in a deranged, post-Christian technocracy. So, keep your third eye on the sky and your ear to the ground, as Sumo and Smokestack connect your main brain vein to a higher plane. Are you ready? Stand by.
Did you get a haircut?
I did. My neighbor came over and he said, actually didn't say anything. He just said nice haircut, and then he threw up a Nazi salute. So I don't know. I don't know if that's exactly what I was going for, but that's what I got.
Unfortunately, the non-Nazi haircut is to be unkempt hippie.
Right.
And if anyone is kempt, it appears to be fascistic, which is an unfortunate side effect. Like, I appear to be unkempt at the moment. Right.
So I'm going to assume that you're a communist.
That's how I am. I'm a communist now. I work for General Mao.
Right. So if your fade is tight, you're down with Hitler.
I don't have any hairstyle. I never have. I just cut my hair shorter, sort of all around, and then it is what it is when it gets too long. I've never done a fade.
No.
I never even really have combed my hair.
Or
brushed it to any direction.
Okay. Yeah.
I've been thinking about becoming a ponytail guy, though. I don't know.
Maybe if you do some braided ponytails and carry a bow.
Yeah.
And a quiver of arrows.
I've admit that, but I think maybe I'll become a yoga guy.
Oh, right.
Certified as a yoga teacher. Mm-hmm. So I need like a few tattoos around my ankle and then a ponytail. And that's how you really sell that.
So you're looking for a side hustle?
I was remembering today about all the. Do you remember before times? Mm-hmm. Before eating disorders were health fads.
Yeah.
What happened? Like people are like, I'm OMAD keto.
Wait,
like,
what's OMAD?
Mean? OMAD, and I found out I had two people independently tell me they were OMAD the other day, and I was like, what? And they said that stands for 1 meal a day. OMAD.
Okay.
I'm OMAD keto. OMAD keto means that 1 meal is keto. And then there was some guy was like, I'm water fasting, and another guy was like, I'm dry fasting.
Oof.
And then then there's the people that only eat like this intermittent fasting thing. I think is just rebranded eating disorder. It's binge purge, and it's like now it's healthy. It's like, no, it isn't. You guys have a very unhealthy relationship with food.
Well, that goes without saying. I mean, that's our entire civilization has an unhealthy relationship with food because it's more cheap and abundant than is good for humankind.
Well, that's probably true, but I'm gonna go, and so like this, they use words like feeding window. Like I'm outside my feeding window.
You do kind of sound like you
need to go to a psychologist.
Right. It's like a lab rat sort of view of diet.
Yeah, and the thing is, none of these people really look great. Mm-hmm. They may lose a little weight, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't seen much evidence that all these OMAD people are. It's just sort of like bulimia. It's like, why don't you just vomit it? I don't.
Well, a buddy of mine did the intermittent fasting thing, and but ate sensibly otherwise, right. and lost some weight that he'd been trying to lose for a while, and it worked out. It worked out okay for him.
I think that the majority of obesity in America is due to people being sleep deprived.
Interesting. All
That's
right.
my theory. I think that if people had sufficient sleep,
Mm-hmm.
most people would be much thinner. That's the main difference between today and like if you look at pictures from the 1960s, everyone's thin,
Mm-hmm.
or the 1950s or whatever. But then somewhere around the 80s, people started plumping up, and it really takes off in the 90s and 2000s. And I think it's because I think their sleep schedules are all messed up.
The internet.
Maybe just like unrealistic expectations of when people should be awake.
Mm-hmm.
Like school before also in the before times when people had school. When people had school and just had common sense to call bulimia.
Now,
Like,
I do agree that a reasonable workday should stop at like 3 or 4, and people should go home and do other things.
yeah, you should get up you shouldn't get up. School should not start before 11.
And there should only be 3 or 4 hours of school max.
Right. And
Yeah.
then any sort of job should start at maybe 10,
Mm-hmm.
and then end at 4 at the most.
Yeah.
Which is what I try to shoot for in my work.
There's this idea that back in pre-industrial times, all people did was like toil in the fields from dawn till dusk. But
and none of that's true.
It's not true. They got up early because it's not hot when it's early. And you do as much of your work as you can when it's hot, but then you're done. You're done at you take a break at like 11, have some lunch, knock out a few of the less physical tasks in the afternoon, and then bring the animals in at the evening, and that's your day. All the hard work's done in the morning, and then you're just chilling. And then in the wintertime, I mean, come on. It's like a vacation. Just eating canned beets.
The European medieval peasant was basically a Mexican on siesta.
Yeah.
He would go out in the morning, and he would do his stuff. Then he'd have his tacos in the middle of the day. Little nap.
Yep.
Do a few more things.
Mm-hmm.
But this is again my consistent gripe of the appeal to an imaginary past proto-human that we're supposed to live up to. Like everyone's like, our hunter-gatherer ancestors only ate wild mice and therefore paleo diet. It's like, that's not true. Like there's no evidence for this paleo diet thing being connected in any capacity.
There's no evidence for hunter-gatherer ancestors either, but that's a different.
It's just assumed.
Yeah,
and then like all the paleo leaves entirely out the gatherer part.
Mm-hmm.
Like they were eating vegetables and stuff.
Yeah,
and berries and roots. And
if caveman came across some wheat, he'd be eating that stuff.
Yeah, he ate nut. I mean, that was a lot of times if hunting wasn't good, that was the majority of your diet was like crappy grains.
Yeah,
and so then it's like, is it really that much different than the modern pantry that's made of corn?
Well, I think the big difference today is industrial seed oils in the diet. Those are genuinely new. Refined sugar to a degree. I think that made a difference, but I'm becoming more and more convinced that stuff like cottonseed oil and soybean oil, the stuff that you'd have to eat, 600 pounds of the grain to get that amount of oil. I do think that is messing up our diet. I think that's
probably true. I think sugar's a red herring.
Yeah.
People are like, all right. So again, it's always like back in caveman times, they would have eaten this much sugar that you're eating in a day in a year. There's always some guy a pretend scientist on TV going in a year, and they would have had 10,000 steps a day. And after they hunted their mammoth, and they all died at 32. It's like, well, then why are we emulating their lifestyle if they all died at 32? It doesn't sound very healthy.
No. I'd be dead. I'd be dead already. What a sad.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then they point to and all they have really to go on is a few, and I do mean a few, tribes in Africa and the Amazon that still live a hunter-gatherer lifestyle. And then when you look at what those guys do, it's not a paleo diet.
The assumption, it's like UN aid sacks. Anyway, the assumption that because there are some people on the planet that live like hunter-gatherers, it's assumed that at one point all humans did that. I mean, that doesn't make any sense at all. And there's no evidence for it. And it's just one more thing that scientists made up and we all believe. Yeah.
It's like and for that reason, I'm OMAD, intermittent keto, paleo diaper man.
OMAD. Oh, I'm gonna do OMAD. I'm gonna get back to you. I need a new eating disorder.
It's all annoying. It's like, why don't you just eat lunch? Why can't people just have lunch and then later you have some dinner?
How are you gonna work all the way till 3 o'clock if you don't have lunch?
Well, they don't. They just sit around and complain and tell people about their eating disorder.
Well, now my friend that was so successful.
The main exercise of like keto is to tell people about keto.
Yeah, it's like veganism. Or CrossFit.
Yeah, you gotta evangelize it everywhere.
Yep.
CrossFit's on the way out, I think, though. I haven't heard a lot of people do CrossFit anymore.
Is it?
They call it other things now. Yeah. Well, I guess all the CrossFit gyms closed, so that's why.
Right.
Take that. Deserved. Deserved. Today, the theme of the show is God Canceled America, the once and future Old West.
Awesome.
It's like, you remember the Once and Future King?
Yeah.
Sword in the Stone. I'm playing on that. It's a good book. Good book. But before that, I wanted to talk about someone brought up to me, they said, in the previous show, you talked about how you rebuild worldviews in like 30 minutes. And they said, how do you do that? And I said, I'll explain it. And so this is my worldview progression.
Okay.
So it began, like I said before, when I saw the UFO. And then that was really a moment of like, I'm Paul on the road to Damascus. And then there's a blinding light in the sky, except it was not a blinding light. It was just a light in the sky. And then, but I was like, well, if that's true, then anything could be true. Because it's like, here it is. It's either some sort of I'm either creating a shared visual auditory hallucination with another person at random, which throws into suspect all perceived reality. A. B, it is really a craft in the sky from another world, which has its own problems. And then, or C, it's some sort of spirit being, all of which make the reality most people operate in not work. Right? It was just something that would not fit. It was like a square peg in a round hole.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So then you go, and then I was like, so that was my beginning. But then, that's not that bad. You can still operate mostly normal. But then I would say I went to the second big one was when I really got into physics hard. And they were like, well, you think things work, but really everything is madness. They're like, you think things make sense, but really all particles are waves. And all waves are particles, and time goes backwards. And it's like, what are you talking about? And then I, like, even today I use things in my semi-regular work, which go backwards in time, which is weird.
Quite.
Like I do stuff with positrons, and positrons are mathematically electrons that go backwards in time. And they exist, and then they hit an electron, they turn into pure light. When a positron, because it like meets itself from the future or some nonsense. I don't know. No one knows. Right. But then, so, and then you go through this and you're like, well, okay, so then you break down you got to do is you got to have an encounter. This is in my roadmap. You got to have an encounter with an otherworldly thing. Because then you're like a when I saw my UFO, it was a bit like I felt like a moose in the taiga. forest in
Okay.
Russia,
Yeah.
and the moose, and you see a helicopter go by.
Mm.
It's just something really different, and it doesn't fit in the natural world. And then you're like, oh, well, there goes the helicopter, and then you just sort of forget about it, but you just realize that because like a moose doesn't have a place to put the helicopter
Right.
in his worldview. And that was the same thing. It was like, well, there's something out there that's beyond us. Don't know what it is. And then it's like, and now tear down your fundamental ideas of reality. But then see, you're still okay because then you can cling to like the human sphere.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, okay, maybe the material world doesn't operate as I think it does. And maybe there's all these things outside of us, right? But then it's like, but I still sort of know how people work, and I understand like, human interaction and morality. And so then you get into, but then actually, as you go on, you realize that most people are just winging it. Like I think what really helped solidify is over the past couple of decades, watching everyone's quote unquote deeply held beliefs radically change in lockstep with the rest of the culture. Right. And then it's like, oh, okay, you guys didn't actually believe any of it. You're just repeating, you're just being a herd animal. Right. And so then that calls into question, like, well, okay, has anything anyone's ever claimed to believe been anything other than just them being a herd animal? Right. And I remember like after I became Catholic, when I did my conversion, at first I bought into the whole thing because I was really looking for a place like where is the solid foundation of like things, and one of the Catholic selling points is they'll be like, we have an unchanging doctrine for 2,000 years. And we've just been we've been the same the whole time, And that's what a lot of converts really go for, because the world is crazy and they tell you about particles streaming through the sky. They go backwards in time, and there are cavemen, but there weren't, and there are woolly mammoths that we're going to unclone, and all of that, and everybody's mad. And you say, I just want some sanity. I just want like a safe place where things don't change, And so then I go to the Catholics and I become Catholic. I'm like, yeah, this is great. And then within like the first couple of years, they're like, now look, death penalty is now immoral. It's like, wait a minute. I remember sitting there, I was talking with the bishop. I was like, wait a minute, doesn't that sort of throw out the whole, like, well, and then they all sit there and they go, well, it's because doo-ba-doo, and this is what we always thought. And I was like, no, it isn't. I have a catechism from 1 year ago which says the opposite. Like, well, see, this is because if you don't know, the Catholic Church recently changed its stance on the death penalty to be, it's now, and they use some weasel word. They said it's now inadmissible in modern society.
Right.
And the reasoning goes, oh, well, look, in past times, again, in the before times of the paleo man or the European peasant or whatever, they had to kill people because they couldn't safely lock people away. Right? And then you say, okay, but that's nonsense.
Agreed.
Because people have had dungeons for literally the dawn of civilization.
Yeah.
And then two, if someone is actually dangerous, you can exile him. Right? You could put him on a boat with some other men, row him to the other side of the Mediterranean, and just leave him. Right? That's something you could do. Or you could just cut his hands off.
True.
And now he's not going to murder anybody. And then, so there was never, under this line of reasoning, there was never any justification for the death penalty if it wasn't like to exact justice for a crime committed. Right? Because they abandoned that whole line of thinking. They were like, oh, nah, I haven't, that's as recent as like 2017 or something. Right? And then so you sit there and you go, oh, and then they, and they like, oh, well, we're going to do and change. And you look into like Vatican II and how much stuff they changed. And then it was like, it's like, oh, okay, there's really no actual there's no actual social, physical, or there's no solid foundation in the social world, in the physical material reality, in history, or in your metaphysics. It's all just fluid. Right? That's where the point you get to, because like, oh, okay, I see. Right? But the problem is no one will admit it. Like everyone in every sphere acts like we've always done this. We've always been at war with East Asia. The Constitution always implied that 11-year-olds should become girls. It always did that. The Constitution always implied that it's like, no, it didn't. And that's the way they are with the Catechism. That's the way people are with like, and we always act like, but at the same time we act like, oh, but in the before times people, and we should try to, it's madness.
So is there some belief that you've held on to through all this? I mean, like what, because I'll be honest, yeah. I'm having trouble relating to your experience.
Yeah.
Fully.
Well, there's one belief I've held on to the whole thing. Okay. And that has really been belief in Christ. Because, at the same time I was going through all this, I was like, the line says, look, I am actually the bedrock that you build things on. Nothing else, right?
Yeah.
And you say, okay, but what does that mean? Like believing in Jesus isn't the same as like, knowing. It's like it's hard to see how that translates to like understanding the physical world,
sure,
or like understanding people, right? And this is why this really plays into why I said the other day on our Kali Yuga episode.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, look, it's a controlled demolition, and that's because it's like in a storm. Remember when Jesus was walking on the water?
Yeah.
And they're like, who's that? And Jesus' reply is, fear not, it's me. And what I took away from that was like he's saying that about not only like his person right there, but also like this is all me too. Like all the storm, the wind, the waves.
Mm-hmm.
This is like God's in control of it. This is me too. Don't be afraid of the storm.
Right.
And that's like today there's a big storm brewing, a metaphorical storm of the collapse of everything. Mm-hmm. Right. But he's like, listen, this is all also me. Like, don't be terrified here. Because if you're on my side, this is going to be fine.
Right.
Well,
I think that a point to pass over there is that, if you have that same situation of the disciples out on the boat in the storm, and Christ isn't there to say, it's me. It's a whole different picture for them.
Yeah.
And it's a whole different picture when your worldview is taken apart. If you don't have Christ standing there saying, don't be afraid, it's me.
Right. And I don't know why I've always said this, but I always fundamentally believed there was a God and that God was good. And that was like my base thing. Mm-hmm. Because it's like Descartes told, I think, therefore I am. Mm-hmm. He was going through and trying to figure out like, well, what do I actually like know? Like, what can I not call into question?
Right.
And the thing he got to is like, well, I exist. And it's like, why? Because I have thoughts. Right? He's like, they may all be wrong. They may all be illusions, but at least I have them. And that means, so I think cognito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. Right?
Right.
He went through a similar thing. Me and Descartes are basically the same. But so I think that this so when people are like, because the thing is, most of your assumptions about how anything works are wrong. They're good enough to get through the day. Like Newtonian physics is good enough to sail a boat, right? Mm-hmm. But if you actually start digging into it, it falls apart. And then you have to throw out things like quantum mechanics. And there's like 7 different interpretations of why that works, and nobody knows. But it does work, right? But no one really understands it. And then in the future, if we ever figure that out better, at some point, someone will drill down into that more and figure out why it doesn't work, right? And so, and all of these things like this, all the social fabric and stuff, like most people are just doing whatever the herd is doing.
Right.
They don't actually have any beliefs at all. They don't actually have any convictions. They just will do, which is disconcerting for people, because you don't want to think people are that like malleable.
Right.
And this is one of the reasons that I think the right has lost the culture war recently, is because the left has assumed that people are near infinitely malleable. And they aren't infinitely malleable, but they're way more malleable than the right wants to give credit for. And so the right has always assumed, well, people won't go for that. It's like, yeah, they will if you just apply enough pressure.
Mm-hmm.
They'll go for anything. You know?
Just about, yeah. I mean, we haven't yet hit the limit.
We haven't yet hit the limit, and there. I mean, you know, Bronze's Perfect was talking about this. He said, you know, who was that lady that got shot in the head? She was like a senator or a governor in Arizona.
Gabby Giffords. Yeah.
Yeah, they dragged her out on the DNC stage, on the DNC convention, like yesterday, to prove she could still talk and stuff.
Right.
And he said this somewhat cynically, but I think he also understands that it's so. It was like, look, they're dragging her out there as sort of a proto, like, look, you don't even need a brain. We can just get rid of that for you, and you'll still be operating fine. Look how happy she is.
Wow.
Lobotomies for everybody, and people will go along with that stuff. I mean, people already have organs removed. I mean, like, you know, already the idea of vestigial organs is in place. You know. And I know that sounds extreme. People are like, well, they won't. Like, yeah, they will. Like, look at what people have gone along with in history.
Yeah.
They'll go along with most anything. And so then when you're like, well, even my culture I grew up in, like, and what I think people believe, that isn't what they really believe. And they'll abandon that in a hot minute. You know, it's just like, well, they're gone.
I think part of the shock that you're describing is it, and we talked about this on the last episode a little bit, is there not a symptom of being too locked into and married to a theory?
It can be, yeah. It's like you've got all these theories, and then when one doesn't jive, you have to jettison one to save the other.
And I feel like maybe that's an enlightenment affliction that we have yet to fully appreciate. That is, we have to have a rigorous theory for everything, rather than letting some things just rest on phenomenology.
Yeah.
And I think that's why faith in Christ is so durable. If you want to just think about it just set aside the supernatural part of it and think about it in a psychological way, because it's as much or more phenomenon for that as it is theoretical.
Yeah.
And so it's more rugged.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and like I say, if you have to jettison, when you come up upon two contradictory, you come to a place where two of your beliefs conflict.
Right.
You got to jettison one to save the other. So that proves to you which one is more valuable to you.
Right. And it's a lot harder to make.
If one of those is Jesus, and you jettison everything but him, he's like, actually, he's a way to stay together.
Exactly.
You know.
Yeah.
But people jettison Jesus early.
Right.
Because they're like, well,
we're at every turn.
They become madness.
Yeah. Well, we're at every turn now. We're being encouraged to throw Jesus overboard. You know.
And that this is how people go mad. This is why people are more and more insane, because there's no firm foundation for anybody.
Yeah.
And so then they just end up lying to cover the holes in their worldviews that don't fit together. It's like different puzzle pieces, and they smash them together, and there's big gaps.
Right.
You're like, I don't think that's, and they're like, yeah, it does. And you tell lies for 30 years, and then you're an insane person. And
that can really that can destroy your psyche if you have a bunch of theories that don't fit together as the basis of your view of reality. That the dissonance you're right, it will drive a person insane and destroy them. Yeah,
like just ask a normal American, like, well, why is murder wrong?
Yeah.
And they have no answer.
Mm-hmm.
They have no answer because it's like, well, if things are random and there's no higher order of good and evil, it's like people go, well, if you need God to tell you not to kill someone with the fear of hell, then you're just a bad person. Like, no, that's not the argument. The argument is good and evil don't mean anything.
Yeah.
It's not that I'm afraid of punishment or not. It's that there is no such thing. It's just a word you made up. Like this, if your brain chemistry had evolved to be slightly different, you would think of you would think of murder as good.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore it's a random choice. And their minds explode and they get very angry at you.
Yeah.
Because you, and then, and you're seeing that now. This is where I want to talk to you about the once and future Old West. Like there were images the past couple of weeks of Chicago raising all their bridges. You see that?
I did.
Pretty great. It was like Gotham Dark Knight in real life.
It really was. It's something out of a film. Yeah.
I didn't even know their bridges went up. I didn't know they were drawbridges.
Oh yeah.
I don't think most people realize that they're like, because they've never been up like our whole lives. There are all these rampaging mobs, and which I mean, I'm not hating on it too much. Rampaging mobs are trad. Having a rampaging mob is a trad thing, and having drawbridges with moats is a trad thing.
Yeah.
So that's fun. But yeah, so there was the Chicago with all the walls came out, and people they become mad because they're unable, having jettisoned Christ, they're unable to discern good from evil.
Yep.
And they just really operate on pleasure versus pain, and fear versus acceptance. And then that leads people to do, because they want to be accepted by this mob and like gain its praise, but they're also terrified of it at the same time. And so then it leads to all this really schizophrenic behavior where the mob, you're like, yeah, the mob's good, it's great. Drop all the bridges so they can't get across the water at the same time. It's just madness. It's mad. And then you're seeing this everywhere. I think walled cities are going to see a return.
Absolutely.
Walled cities, and this is why it's sort of a trad thing. So it's not to be.
Oh yeah, I'm going to build one, dog.
We're going to have walled cities. We're going to have probably moats. Maybe a modern version of a castle could be useful. And it's going to be good. Like, have you seen there was a thread the other day about Alphaville in Brazil. Did you see that?
No.
So Brazil has already sort of gone down this path of like massive crime, and then mixed with like one little bit of the population having a lot of money and the rest of them having nothing.
Yep.
And what happened? It has happened really fast in Brazil. And though Brazil is also big, like America, it's not as big as America, and a lot of it is the Amazon rainforest. So it's hard to live there. But so what they did is these favelas and stuff grew really, really quickly, like in the span of years. Or which isn't, you think about how quickly San Francisco turned into a nightmare. And what happened was people didn't have time to like move away. So these walls just went up around these suburbs. And so you can look over and there's pictures of these online. Like Alphaville is a great one. I don't know why it's called Alphaville. That seems a bit sci-fi, but it is. There's a couple of these where you look around and there are these giant cities, like just slums as far as you can see. And then there's this wall, and then the other side is like a green golf course.
Wow.
And like these suburbs that look like an American suburb, and it's fully self-contained. It's like a self-contained, like they have a grocery store, they have a police department, they have a little hospital clinic there, and they don't really need to go outside of the walls very often, right? If ever. And if they need to go to the airport to fly, they get in the helicopter, they fly over the slum, they go to the airport, and they fly to wherever other country they are. And you think, well, why don't people just leave? And it's like, well, their business is still, for some reason, there, right? Maybe it's connected to Rio de Janeiro or whatever.
Right.
And that's the future of America. It's going to be like the Old West. Lots of gun battles. but also a little bit medieval, like the walled cities.
You had little forts and
moats.
garrisons and towns where you could get some safety, but if you're traveling out on the plains, you're liable to get scalped.
Right.
Yeah.
Which did you ever? There was a program the U.S. government ran for a while, which it would offer cash money for Indian scalps.
I believe that.
Yeah, because and we've always done this. There's a long history. We've always done the Indian scalp, and then in like 5 years, this is why you can't put any stock in it, because like in 5-10 years, the narrative will flip over, and then like it'll be trans rights to murder Native Americans or something.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
It'll be completely different. It's just always changing.
There's no destination. The train just keeps rolling. You don't know
There's
where
no
it's
destination.
headed.
The train just keeps rolling and the wheels come off.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so even though the wheels are off, the train just keeps rolling.
Right.
So I was wondering, where do you think is the best places to escape to? I think we talked about this a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe not, but like, so you've got because if you keep in mind this once and future old West thing,
mm-hmm.
The West again looks pretty dismal. At least California, Portland,
right,
Seattle, that's all gone.
Well, the Old West had a gold rush
to
get everybody out there, and it doesn't have that anymore.
Right. It had a tech rush.
They do have a lot of space. Bubble. Yeah. I mean, places like Idaho.
Yeah.
They have natural resources. They have pretty good terrain. The winters are rough,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But you can sustain, because here's the deal with the walled cities and Alphaville and all this stuff, is that a society can only hold itself together if it has a shared worldview. That everybody agrees, this is the way we live, this is what we believe, that's how we get along. It's the fabric that holds everybody together. And so America's has been destroyed utterly. And there will be chaos until we resort ourselves into sub-societies that have a cohesive worldview and culture across them. And that's just the way it is. It's just, there's no change in that. And we're in a time of resorting.
Did you see that article? New York is dead forever.
I've seen several, to that tune. I don't know if I saw that one.
Well, there was a great article in the New York Post called "New York City's Dead Forever," and he made some good points. He said, "So what? There's the lockdowns from the virus, right, which is really bad for it. But then there was the rampaging mobs, which are never good for a city, and a lot of people have just left." Right. And he said they've not only like left the city, but that's a smaller portion. It's still a lot. A lot of people have done that. Like if you were wealthy, you just bought another house in a different place.
Right.
You moved away. A lot of wealthy people in New York do that. But if you weren't wealthy, but you've realized that there's no reason for anyone in the central business district to ever come back.
Mm-hmm.
Because we are now, there was BC and AD, and then now there's BB and AB.
Meaning?
Which BB was before bandwidth and AB is after bandwidth.
Right.
Like we've had the internet for a while. But the last time there was a recession, 2008, bandwidth wasn't good enough that you could have a 50-person Zoom call.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But now it is. And everyone was like, wait a minute, is there any reason for us to ever go back to those downtown offices?
Nope.
It's cheaper this way. And I think people have realized that. And I don't think New York and other similar cities are going to ever recover, which is a big statement.
Yeah.
But like people are like, we're going to get back to normal. It's like, I don't think they're ever going to go back because there's no reason to. And now because the other reason that you would go is that you would go for nightlife and, the pleasures of the city.
Right.
But if those can be taken away instantly for on a whim, and then they're there and you're locked down with like New York has military style checkpoints getting into New York now, and you have to do a 14-day quarantine when you go in. It's like, well, why would I visit?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like, well, what are you talking about? Why would anybody go there?
Being locked down in a leafy suburb is much different than being locked down in New York City. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, that's true. But so it's like, well, why is anyone? So on the one hand, I sort of think there's going to be this Alphaville thing and this like moats and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, then I say, well, maybe everyone will just leave, and the age of the city is over for a while, because this stuff happens. You have city ages, and then it reverts into an age where everyone's out in the countryside.
Right.
And these go back and forth throughout history, and maybe the age of cities just died overnight. And I don't. It's a bit of a. I don't know.
Well,
maybe.
if the people fleeing the city, bring
California can't keep its lights on.
Right. Which is pretty amazing. Yeah.
It's like rolling blackouts. Everyone's homeless, and like you think about, this continues for 5 more years.
Well, it's been going on for 5 years, really. I mean, this rolling blackout thing, it gets memory hold every time, but they do this almost every year and they have a new excuse for it. But they do like last year it was forest fires. Oh, we're cutting the power off because of the forest fires. I never believed that for a second. They're cutting the power off because they can't keep the lights on. Same thing happened in South Africa, as that place has been in a similar collapse.
And a lot of that is because people got really upset about global warming.
Yeah.
Which again, probably not real. But and they were like, well, we can need only renewable energy.
Mm-hmm.
And like windmills and stuff. And then you just do some simple math, and it's like, guys, there's not enough.
No, it's not.
First of all, all California does is they purchase electricity from neighboring places that use coal.
Yeah.
A lot of which is hard and wasteful, and it's way more CO2 intensive to transmit all that power over than it would be but then they supplement it with a bunch of wind and solar, which is great. I'm all for wind and solar, but it's simply if you do the math, it cannot produce the same kilowatt hours.
I think there's an interesting principle and picture there in that California outsources their pollution to the red states and pretends that they don't create pollution. Yeah. It's like, no, they're just outsourcing it to people they don't like in Idaho or wherever, so that they can have all the pollution.
Yeah, this is the American ability to outsource anything. Like that may be a firm foundation. America can outsource anything. They also outsource their racism.
Yeah.
Like, listen, I know we're super not racist, and we love Apple, and they have slave factories,
right,
with Uyghur Muslims in them, and there's still genocide, but that's okay because it's over there.
It's over there, yeah.
And they outsource. Like, why don't you just be racist yourself? Build your own phone. Pay your own Chinese people.
At least it's honest.
At least it's honest. Like, I think, George Lucas. I don't think George Lucas married a black lady, but he was. So people are like he was definitely racist toward Asians. You ever watch Star Wars?
I try to avoid. I avoid Star Wars.
But yeah, it's like what? Just make your own phone. Make your own power.
Yeah.
Make your own racism.
Yeah.
Don't outsource everything to America. They outsource their pollution. They outsource and then eventually you've outsourced everything. And it's like, well, why are you even here? And then it just sort of decays away.
Right. And that's what we're seeing. Yeah.
At least at the racism factory, you're producing something.
Racism factory.
We
put out 7 bushel baskets of racism today, boss.
They're in Ohio or wherever the racism factory is located. Right. You make
that's good. That's Goodyear. That's the racism factory, apparently.
Yeah, Goodyear, and you come up. You have the R&D department where you come up with new ethnic slurs. And it could be, and at least it's made in America. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
People. America also outsources its racism to Mexico. People are like we're combating white supremacy. We love Mexico. Like, do you even have any idea?
Yeah.
About Mexico.
Yeah.
And how like the entire ruling class is white people,
right,
descended from the Spaniards, and everyone else is like living in a slum. It's like that's a real white supremacist country.
Not to mention the drug trade. All these poor brown people have to die and suffer so you can do a few lines of cocaine every day.
Yeah, so for your weed,
right?
And everybody, the one I met. I guess this is where I become a boomer, and I'm like, don't outsource stuff. Like, because I knew a guy. There was one guy I met, and he was like he was the epitome of the American boomer that did everything for himself. And at first, I was like, this is ridiculous. Like this guy is. Well, one, he was a ridiculous human, but then two, I gradually gained respect for him. I met him. He was a Vietnam veteran. And I met him when the first time I tried to go skydiving. And me and my roommate, who'd never flown on a plane before, I said, let's go skydiving today. And he was like, sure, that's, he'd
never been in a plane before?
Yeah. And he'd never been on a plane. And I was like, and halfway there, he's like, I've never flown on a plane before. I was like, I did not know that. He's like, yeah. And so I was like, well, so you're okay to jump out of one? Are you going to be okay? He's like, yeah, I think I can do it. So we go and we follow the map directions, and then we pull up to this field in the middle of nowhere, and there's nobody there. And we wait around for a little bit. We're just about to leave because we're just standing in the field listening to birds go caw caw, and like 6 a.m. And then like just before about to leave, this dusty, like over the horizon comes this cloud of dust. And then there's this guy, this red truck, and he's driving. And then, like, on this big trailer is this plane.
Awesome.
He pulls down into the field. He hops out with, I guess, his wife or girlfriend, who's a similar age of him. And the first thing he does is he has a bandana on, and he whips it off, and he goes, woo! First thing he does, and he's like quite old.
Okay.
Like bald, gray, little stupid, like not stupid, but like stooped over.
Okay.
From being old.
Mm-hmm.
But he still jumps out and goes, woo! Who's ready to skydive? And so he just pulled up with his plane on this trailer. And so my roommate looks at me and goes, is this normal for skydiving? I said, I don't know. It's my first time skydiving. And so he takes us in this little shed he unlocks. He gives us he makes us watch a 15-minute video called How to Skydive.
Oh, well, that's good.
This is our training.
Right.
Because I did not know. I thought it was going to be like the normal thing where like the first time you go skydiving, you go tandem.
Mm-hmm.
But I found out when I got in the plane that it was like, no, you're doing this on your own.
Are you kidding me?
No. He's like, here you go. And so we get because this guy wasn't following any rules that I could see. He just had a plane, and people would send him money, and he'd take them skydiving. He learned to skydive in Nam, as he told me repeatedly.
Right.
Well, in Nam, this is how we did it. And I was like, I don't know if I want to skydive like in Nam, but whatever.
Were you on a static line for this?
What now?
Did they static line you?
Yes, it was a static line thing.
Oh, that's a relief.
It's not as bad, but so static line means it pulls for you, like when you go up. So anyway, we got up there. He's like, we get up there. He's like, okay, and then he gave us little things like, now these chutes, I packed myself. Now look, this you want to make sure you use your right hand. The right hand grabs the strap. If for some reason it doesn't pull for you, you pull it. It goes off. Parachute open. You're good. Don't use your left hand. Left hand makes the chute come off.
Oh no.
I remember going, why is that a strap? And he's like, what are you going to do if you get stuck in a tree? I said,
Good point.
I guess. But shouldn't it be a little harder than an identical strap on the other side? Like maybe it should be a 3-strap thing. I don't know. But anyway, we both start to get cold feet because this is looking like a not legitimate organization.
Right.
And then, my roommate's looking at me like, hey, is this fine? I've never flown in a plane. Is this how plane flying goes? And so I said, I don't, and then I asked him, I said, have you ever had anyone die? And he goes, oh yeah. So then I start to leave, but then he gets all mad because he's like, we wasted his time. And he starts calling us like, pansies and sissies and stuff. And so I was like, fine, I'll do it. I'll go up in your plane. I'll listen to your boomer peer pressure. And so we get up there and he loads us in the plane from the front to the back. Right.
Okay.
And because of the way it is, because you're being shoved toward the back, the smaller person has to go in first.
Mm-hmm.
So my roommate was a Nephilim. He was like 6'7".
Okay.
So I go in first, and that means he's closest to the door. He has to go first. So he's never flown in a plane before, and he has to jump out first on his own. And we get up there, and we start flying, and he opens the door, and he goes, okay, now you got to climb out and hang off the wing. Otherwise, you'll hit the tail.
Oh, man.
And he had this handlebar he'd welded to the wing, and you would... So my roommate starts to climb, like very, very... He starts to climb out onto the wing of a flying airplane.
Okay.
Right? Which is a trip if you've never done it. If you've never flown on the wing of an airplane.
Never done that, no.
It's pretty intense. There's a lot of wind. But anyway, he's out there on the side, and I'm looking through the little porthole window at him, from my spot.
Mm-hmm.
And I see him just sitting there holding on, his body flapping in the wind. And he looks over at me and he just shakes his head like, no way. I'm not letting go. No way. I'm coming back in. Right? Like,
yeah.
No way. And so he reaches to start coming in, but just as he lets go one hand to reach, we hit a little turbulence bump.
Oh.
And his fingers of his hand that are still holding there are just barely hanging on. And he's like trying to reach with the other hand, but he can't quite reach it,
Mm-hmm.
And he's just, and he looks over at me for like 1 second as he's slipping. Like he looks into the porthole with his fingers just sort of being slowly stripped off the bar by the drag force of the air. And it was the most terrified I've ever seen any human look in my whole life. There was no color in his face, just complete white, like bloodshot eyes. And then he just flies past the window and he's gone. And then I go up to the door and I look down. Most people, you see people that are supposed to, you're parachuting and you're like laying down belly first.
Right.
I look down the window and his face is pointed back up at me. So he's falling down back first, and his feet and arms are just flailing in the air.
Wait, his chute? Why didn't his chute open?
His chute has opened. He's just upside down.
Was he like tangled in it?
Yeah, he's like falling into his own chute.
Oh no!
And I said, and then he just disappeared out of sight. And the boomer guy, who I eventually came to respect it for being the ultimate in do-it-yourself, don't outsource anything. He said, he'll be fine. That's all he said. And then I had to climb out on the wing and let go. And then I was steering my chute and trying to, and then I realized we're over a major interstate. And I'm trying to not get near the interstate. And I was like, how do you fly the parachute? And then there was this brief thing I remember in this 15-minute video that was my whole training. It was like when you pull both, you got to pull, you pull one side or the other to steer it. If you pull both sides real hard, you'll sort of make a big cup shape with your parachute.
Mm-hmm.
This will slow you down, but don't do that too high because you'll lose the canopy shape.
Oh,
You
right.
do it too high, right? You want to do this just before you land. And so I'm trying to do this and not lose the canopy shape. And I'm looking for my roommate. Is he dead? Did he splat on the floor? You know. And so then I go and then I get it, and I'm trying to figure out how close the ground is because I didn't have any sort of altimeter device. It was just all by eye. Which I later went skydiving with like professional people, and it was totally different. And you had like gauges and measures, and you weren't just winging it. But and so then I get like, it's really hard to tell how close the ground is when you're skydiving. Like it stays far away for a long time, and then it gets really big really quickly.
Right.
And when you have your parachute open, you're still falling fast. Like you're not falling lethal fast, but you're still falling fast. And so I'm like, well, okay, I guess it's now. And then I pull down both real hard. And then I realize I'm still maybe 40, 50 feet up in the air. And my chute collapses and I just fall. And I hit the ground, hit my skull with my knees, almost knocked myself out. I'm laying there in the field seeing stars. And then my roommate comes over to me and goes, let's not do that again. Leans over me.
I'm just glad he made
leans
it.
over me while I'm seeing stars. Yeah. So, but that guy, eventually, he had his own house. He was off the grid. He had his own airplane. Like he wouldn't have been affected by lockdowns in any way.
No.
He'd be like, oh yeah, you gotta go through all this stuff at the airport. I'm just gonna fly my own plane. Oh yeah, well they're gonna check me when I land. I'm just gonna fly that thing into a mountain and parachute out of it. That was his attitude. And then I still don't quite get this. Well, I guess I thought he was gonna like instruct us, and stuff. But then like, when I'm halfway down, because I was really sort of super nervous. And I wasn't paying that much attention to the rest of what was going on in the plane. So I thought he was flying it. But like when I'm halfway down, I hear, "Wah!" And I look up and he's just screaming past me. Hasn't pulled his chute yet. just like flying past me in full free fall.
Oh, man.
This old guy going, "Wah!" And then he pulls his chute at like the last possible second, and then glides to the ground. And then I guess maybe his wife or girlfriend was flying the plane. I really thought he was. And then I was like, what did you just do? You crazy. So anyway, that is the sort of guy that's going to get, my point in all that was that's the sort of guy fitted for the new Old West. Yeah. That's the sort of guy you got to become. And you got to hang out with those sort of guys to learn how to do it.
Yep.
You told me you were going to start a rap album.
We did. I'm writing a rap song.
Yeah.
So stay tuned. I'm going to be a rapper.
Smokestack. Smokestack isn't a bad rapper name.
DJ Smokestack.
There needs to be a lot more trucker rap.
I'm going to come at you with some fresh rhymes.
Country music is really, yeah.
Well, I feel like
for whatever reason, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead with the trucker rap.
I was just like, there's all country music in a. If you stop at a Flying J,
yeah, it's
all country music.
That's true.
I feel like there should be trucker rap. Where they're sitting there and they rap about, falling asleep after taking all their painkillers for their back, falling asleep on the road.
Well, I don't know anything about trucking is the problem. So I was going to do some self-deprecating conspiracy theory / political rap. It's going to be kind of highbrow, not a lot of profanity. Cause there's that dude Mint Chip out there. He's doing some interesting stuff, but I feel like the language is a little coarse. I want to make something that's a little more highbrow and sophisticated. So that's the project I'm working on. More on that, as it unfolds. Maybe we'll release a single on the podcast.
Yeah, and we should do that. Because one, we got to have trucker outreach,
right?
Because we're still not at our full. I stated at the beginning I wanted to be in every truck stop. We still haven't reached full market penetration with the trucker community. I'm sad to say, we're still working on that. And then we could have trucker lifestyle education. I was friends with a trucker for a long time, and he he used to tell me about how he couldn't sleep because his back hurt so much from sitting in the car. So what he would do is you weren't allowed to take medications,
Right.
because they would interfere with your driving unless they were over the counter. So he would just drink bottles of NyQuil
Oof.
to fall asleep, and that's the true trucker lifestyle. Like he drink, a bottle of NyQuil a night. Not good for your liver.
That's a hard life.
But you could really make a rap song out of that. I feel like that's
Okay.
the lifestyle.
All right. I'm gonna do some research. Maybe I'll do a ride along for a while. Drink some NyQuil.
Yeah.
Be really lonely.
Yeah. So anyway, I said this is about the once and future Old West. So now we're going to talk about the once Old West.
Okay.
Right. And I got this is from a book, which I'll recommend you guys go read, called The Real Cowboys and Aliens. Because I was thinking about, this Old West thing, and then I remembered this book. And I was like, people think that the American Old West was one way, but actually it was pretty weird too. Like, not only was there all the Indian stuff and the people, because like a lot of guys would go, like Indian people would be captured and they would raid a village and stuff.
Yeah.
And so Indian tribes were all filled with like these white children they'd taken that grew up with, they grew up with the tribe and then didn't want to go back because, frankly, living as an Indian was more fun. I mean, it's true. Like, what little boy wants to go back to like puritanical,
school
when he can just sit outside and shoot bows and arrows at deer all day? That's so. A lot of them didn't ever want to go back, but there was a lot of weirdness going on out there. But also, what I found is that people think like the flying saucer thing began in the 1940s, but if you dig, it goes back way further. Like basically, the oldest I found was a Roman general talking about there were objects in the sky that looked like shields, and they were like blazing with light.
Ooh,
which is a UFO encounter. Which again makes me think like, oh, that show we did where we talked about like how they're actually jumping through relativity time and they're coming back here, and every time they come back, it's 10,000 years later. Like that's the most compelling evidence for that line of thought.
Sure.
Because there's a Roman guys, like there were shields in the sky and they were flying around and they had gold. They were like, on fire with this light. But the Old West had all this too. And I mean, what's great about it is this is before there were any man-made aircraft at all. I mean, there were hot air balloons.
Sure.
Those didn't fly too high, and you could tell what they were. There were no airplanes, there were no airships, there were no helicopters, right? And so all this is like, well, you couldn't have been mistaken for something else, And so I'll lay out a couple of these for you, just to give you a different perspective on what the Old West was like, so you can know what the New West will be like.
All right.
Because I want to talk next time about NASA's UFO encounters.
Okay.
So you can see that this is a continuation of a long running theme. Because there was this thing in the 1940s that happened in the 50s where this Men in Black showed up and all this government cover up. And one of the things one of the questions with that is, it's like, well, why were they so prepared to do these giant cover-ups if this was the first one?
Good point.
Right? Like, how was there already a team to go and retrieve Roswell and leave and like scatter everybody's brains or whatever? It's because this has been apparently, the United States government has had UFO workers for a long time, maybe since George Washington.
Ooh.
Right. So, okay. So September 1864, there was a fur trapper in Montana named James Lumley. Right. He was trapping in an area known as the Codet Pass. And one night after the sun went down, he saw a brilliant, bright object streak through the sky, which sounds like a meteor. I've seen brilliant meteors. Cincinnati Commercial reported it as a bright, luminous body in the heavens, which was moving with great rapidity in an easterly direction. As it traveled, he saw it split into several smaller pieces in an explosion with a great flash. And moments later, he heard like a giant like bang, and then felt the air smell with sulfur. So the next day, he got up from his camp to investigate, and he could see this giant wide path of destruction. Trees knocked over, ground plowed up, all that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Charred, burned. He said it was like 2 miles of just upturned earth, and everything. So he followed the trail till he got to the end of it, which he described to be an immense stone embedded in the side of a mountain.
Ooh.
So again, so far sounds like a meteor crash, right? But then here was the weird part. So you're reading this newspaper article, and you're like, okay, this guy saw a meteor. And then he says, he goes, Lumley Glenn claimed, he said the stone was, quote, divided into compartments, and that parts of it had hieroglyphics on it, similar to the writings of ancient Egypt. The newspaper reported Lumley was confident the glyphs were the work of human hands, and the stone itself, although but a fragment of an immense body, must have been used for some purpose by animated beings. He also found fragments of glass and claimed the area was stained with some sort of strange liquid.
Weird.
And there's again 1864.
Yeah.
In Montana, some guy is seeing an Egyptian hieroglyphic thing just into the mountain, right? And so, where is this place? This is a great one. This might be a future expedition because he says it's near Cadott Pass. I think that's probably named something else now, but we can figure out where that was and go see if we can find this sphere.
I'm down.
Maybe we can. Maybe that's what Joseph Smith saw, and he got his hieroglyphics, and then he learned about Cobol. Who knows? Maybe we could be the next Joseph Smiths.
Now let's not get carried away.
Well, you never know. It's in God's hands.
Indeed.
Then there was in 1873, there was the Flying Serpent. This isn't really a UFO, but it's weird. So it was June 26, 1873. 2 civilians of Fort Scott, Kansas, and several soldiers in the cavalry in the fort itself, all at the same time, reported seeing what looked like a huge serpent encircling the sun.
Ooh.
Okay, so that would be very scary. If you got up in the morning and there was a snake flying in a circle around the sun,
yeah,
I would be like, okay, well, the world's ending. Pack it in, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Trumpets have blown. Hope you're right with God. This is obviously the end. But anyway, they said it remained visible for some moments, right? And you think, well, okay, there's some guys. But here's the clincher. Another guy named Mr. Harden in Texas. So the first was in Kansas. This guy's in Texas. He was a farmer, and he and his other farmers saw the same thing. And they reported it same time to their local newspaper. So a newspaper in Texas and a newspaper in Kansas both have witnesses reporting the same thing, same morning.
Weird.
Snake circling the sun. Mr. Harden and his company described, he said it seemed to be as large as a long telegraph pole, which isn't as big as I was thinking, yellow striped in color, and seemed to float along without effort. As the farmers watched the snake moved as the serpent does, sinusoidally through the sky and drifted off east. As it did this, it would coil, turn up, thrust its head as if it were striking at invisible things the men could not see. And this incident, of course, I know we all know this, was in Flying Saucers Are Real by Donald Kehoe in 1950, which we've all read.
Yeah, indeed.
It is one of the seminal UFO books, Flying Saucers Are Real, Donald Kehoe. If you want to get UFOs, that one, and They Knew Too Much About UFOs, was probably the golden era. And then the main book in the modern era is probably Communion with Whitley Strieber, in which he takes it into a weird religious turn.
Mm-hmm.
And it's called Communion. And that's where the picture of the gray alien comes in.
Gotcha.
Whitley Strieber. Anyway, so and Donald Kehoe claimed that this was some sort of fast-moving luminous UFO leaving like a light flash, like a blur, because it was going so fast. I don't know why. It sounds more like he saw a Chinese dragon.
Yeah,
which are obviously real. 15 to 20 years before this, in 1857, 58 people in Nebraska said they saw a giant snake in the sky going over a steamboat. Also, so, and the Native Americans had the rainbow snake, right? Maybe this is the rainbow snake. I don't know. There are these. This isn't a UFO so much as it's sort of one of those miracles in the sky.
Yeah.
Like the most recent one being like Fatma, where the sun danced around in a circle.
What?
You know the Fatma. The
Yeah.
Fatma mystery?
Right.
Yeah.
I didn't know the sun danced around though. That's cool.
Oh yeah, that was the miracle of the sun in Fatma. Is the sun just sort of moves around in the sky. And then you say, well, that's not possible because the sun is a stationary star. And the only way that could happen is if the Earth was jumping around erratically. But then everyone in the world would notice it. And then you say, yeah, but things don't quite work like you think they do, right? There was another one. That one was so interesting, actually. That was so widespread, the snake around the sun. There was actually a folk song in America, in the backcountry, written about it.
Ooh.
Which I will now sing for you. Flying engine, without no wing or wheel, it came a-roaring in the sky, with lights along the side and scales like a serpent's hide. It's not a very good song, really. You can see why it died out. But it's not a very good song. But there was a song that people would play with a banjo about the time they saw the snake in the sky. So there was another one in 1884. John Ellis. He and 3 other cowboys and a bunch of other people in Binkelman, Nebraska, or actually it was a ranch north of Binkelman, Nebraska. They saw a UFO crash. So they were doing a cow roundup, and suddenly the 3 cowboys heard, quoted in the paper, quote, a terrific whirring noise. And they looked up in the sky and they saw a blazing streak of light shooting down toward the ground. They described it as a cylindrical airship between 50 and 60 feet long, 10 to 12 feet wide, composed of a strange metal that was extremely light when they picked up the pieces later. The fiery cylinder struck the earth some distance away, falling into a ravine, and they set off immediately in search of the object and found it. As reported in the Nebraska Nugget. Quote,
that's wild.
Yeah. So Ellis rode at once to the spot and saw fragments of cogwheels and other pieces of machinery on the ground, scattered in the path by the aerial visitor, glowing with heat so intense as to scorch the grass for a long distance around each fragment and made it impossible for one to approach it. One piece looked like the blade of a propeller, was picked up by a spade and could not weigh more than 5 pounds, but appeared as strong and compact as any known metal. A fragment of wheel with a milled arm, apparently having a diameter of 7 to 8 feet, that's a big wheel, 7 to 8 feet diameter, was picked up and seemed to be the same material and had the same remarkable likeness. The 3 cowboys went to the edge of the ravine to look at the object itself, but it was on fire, so brightly ablaze, the eye could not rest upon it for more than a moment. Undeterred, one of the cowboys, named Alf Williamson, dismounted and approached the object. When he got within 200 feet of the blaze, he, quote, fell senseless from gazing at it at too close quarters. His hair was singed to a crisp, and his face covered with blisters. That sounds like radiation to me.
It sure does.
Right? Which they wouldn't have known about at the time either. That's another thing. It's like one of these things like, well, they don't even know about radiation, so how could they fake a radiation burn? Like if you were going to hoax this and make this up, like you wouldn't put in that your face got burned with it, like blisters and stuff.
Right.
Because radiation isn't in the consciousness yet. Anyway, Williamson was brought back to Ellis's house and they called the doctor. He said his condition was serious, and they telegraphed his brother in Denver to come. The object blazed for several hours. Many others from the neighboring ranches came to view it. But even after it fell, the light of the blaze was still. But even hours after it fell, the light of the blaze was still too bright to look at directly. The following morning, though, many again visited the site and had cooled enough to look at. A man named Rawlings, E.W. Rawlings, the local cattle inspector, came and made a report. He looked it over and confirmed the story to the newspaper of the Cowboys. Now, here's where it gets really strange, it was so intense that Ellis actually went to the land office that next day to buy the land so he could have the artifact. So he goes and buys the land. But here's where it gets really strange. So on June 10th, right? So this is 4 days later. The whole town has come to look at this weird thing. People have come from miles around. But on June 10th, 4 days later, this big, tremendous rainstorm kicked up about 2 o'clock. Everyone ran to shelter, a dozen or more people, including the reporter of the newspaper that was getting the story. The rain fell so hard and thick it was impossible to see through for more than a few dozen feet. It lasted for about half an hour, and when it sucked off again, the object was gone, dissolved into the air. They were astounded, quote, to see that the queer object had melted, dissolved by water like a spoonful of salt. Scarcely a vestige remained. A small jelly-like pool stood there on the ground where it was. But under the eyes of the observers, these grew thinner and thinner till they were but muddy water. The air was filled with a faint, sweetish smell. That's the end of the report, which sounds to me like extraterrestrial heart-based crash retrieval. Like weather manipulation. It's like we got to get our thing back. Make the weather rain. Come down, scoop it up. Bye-bye. Turn off the rain.
Right.
Extraterrestrial heart-based crash retrieval.
There you go.
Or they just melt with water. I don't know. It seems a bit weird if they would melt with water.
Well, if there was an exposed nuclear core, don't those basically burn in the air? Good point. Good point. And would it also cause the metal around it to rapidly oxidize?
Yes.
just a thought.
I don't know. The thing that gets me about that one is the radiation burns.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this all sounds like a small exposed nuclear fuel situation,
right?
To me, but
it does. But
so the ancient Egypt had nuclear powered relativistic space travel.
That's the only possible conclusion.
That's where I'm taking it.
It's the only possible conclusion. All right, now this last one here is and this book, The Real Cowboys and Aliens, is great, well done research by a lot of guys. They went back, looked at all these old reports and stuff. It has a bunch of stories in there. Some of them were too outlandish even for me, like the one where the Cowboys get in a gunfight with a pterodactyl. The pterodactyl doesn't shoot back. They're just shooting at the pterodactyl. The pterodactyl obviously doesn't use its big flappy wings to pull out 6-shooters. So that would be pretty cool.
That would.
But no, there's a pterodactyl. And the pterodactyl story, that's one of those that they killed this pterodactyl and they took pictures of it. And there's all these people that claim to have seen the picture, but the picture itself cannot be found.
Right.
And I mean hundreds of people were like, oh yeah, I saw the picture of the pterodactyl. It was going around
the cover-up
Kansas for years.
The George Washington's Freemason UFO cover-up crew came and took the pictures, obviously.
Yeah. Okay, so this next one is in 1888. And I'm just going to let you, I'm not going to tell you the title of this one. Okay. You're going to tell me what it sounds like. Okay. So this is a story out of a journal. It's not out of a newspaper. So there's this guy named Mr. Wyatt in California. He was a cattleman in the 1880s. Mm-hmm. And he was in Big Woods country, as he called it, in Humboldt County. So it's the very top of California, almost in Oregon. So he's in bear country. He's in mountain lion. He's up there. One of the only few white guys. A lot of Indians there. He lived there for a couple of years, and he'd lodged with the local Indian tribe, become their friend, learn their language. Sort of an honorary tribe member. Mm-hmm. He would come and participate in ceremonies and such. And he kept a journal because there wasn't much else to do out there. So they got his journal and they were reading through it, and there's this one curious story in there that he relates to sort of offhand and does not elaborate on in any way later. Right? Mm. So anyway, it says one day he says he's out in the woods and he comes across this tribe member, an Indian guy, carrying a huge platter of raw meat, like a big plate of raw meat. And he asked about it. Wyatt asked about it. He's like, hey, what's with the raw meat? And the Indian was very reluctant. He was like, And I gotta say, I can't tell you. You know, and then but he keeps needing like, no, tell me about the wrong because he could speak his language and stuff. And so finally the tribeman is like, oh, okay, come on. So he leads him to a nearby cave along the cliff face. Okay. Inside the cave, Wyatt then said he saw a sitting cross-legged Indian style, almost in meditation on the floor. He said, I saw a man that was very large, muscular, and hairy. It was covered entirely with long, shiny black hair, save for the palms around its eye and the area around its eyes. Additionally, it didn't seem to have a neck, or a very small one, looking almost as if the head rested directly upon the shoulders. So what's that sounding like to you?
That's either a Bigfoot or a Nephilim.
right. It's a bit. And so he said, despite appearing very frightening, Wyatt said the monster did not seem aggressive, and the Indian approached, gave him the meat, and he sat quietly on the floor eating his dinner. Just, in meditation seat position.
Mm-hmm.
And so Wyatt claims that he went back to visit this creature in the cave a dozen times. He just says, and I went back a dozen times. And then he doesn't write about it anymore. And the thing about this one is this is a journal that just someone found later. This wasn't meant for publication.
Wow.
Right? That's the really weird part about this. Like, he's not writing this for anybody. So anyway, he did write that he asked the Indian, he's like, what is this guy? And the Indian was like, I can't tell you. I can't tell you. He's like, no, come on, tell me. So finally, the Indian's like, it's sacred. I can't tell you what it is. It's a sacred Indian thing. And Wyatt goes, I'll give you 2 pounds of tobacco, an axe, and a compass. He's like, okay, fine. It's not that sacred. So he gives him 2 pounds of tobacco, an axe, and a compass. And the Indian took Wyatt up on a mountain, up on the mountain that they were in. They were in the cave. And he said, quote, men came down from the sky, quote, in a small moon. And they dropped off several hairy creatures which the Indians called crazy bears. The Indian also stated that the men from the sky had dropped off these crazy bears several times before in the past. The men from the small moon looked in every way human, but they had short hair and wore tight-fitting silver clothes. So 1880, this guy's writing about basically space spandex, which again shouldn't be. That's an anachronism.
Dude,
it doesn't fit.
It's Elon Musk, man.
Yeah, like why would they? How would he know about tight-fitting silver? It's very, he's an 1880s cowboy describing spandex, which wouldn't. It's like the radiation thing. It doesn't fit. Like, how is this possible?
All of this fits perfectly into all different Elon Musk projects. He's going to be that guy. He's going to go back in time, drop off some big feet with the Indians, and the whole circle is going to be complete. Yeah.
So the Indians said that they believed the crazy bears were capable of powerful medicine, which is why they took care of them.
There you go.
And that's the end of the story. And he does it. He keeps on writing his journal. He's like, today I got some more cows. I went into town, met Ellie. She didn't want to go out for dinner, but never brings it up again. And it's like, guy, why didn't you write more about the crazy bear, which is obviously a Bigfoot, which is a Bigfoot from space. So the cowboy meets a Bigfoot from space, and he didn't write anything else about it. So then I was like,
it's interesting because
that's possible, but that gave me a whole new. Yeah,
we're having data problems, but it made me think about so many other times we've talked about aliens and UFOs and stuff. Is people don't really feel the need to make a big deal about it at the time, and then later, like, oh, that was weird. I should write that down, or that's weird. I should ask my buddy about that. Like your story with your sighting.
Yeah, I know. And this guy sees a meditating space Bigfoot. And he's like, well, it's a Monday, But this is why I think your worldview has to be sort of malleable, because occasionally you may in your life come across a meditating crazy bear,
right?
Which is a great name for a Bigfoot, by the way. The Indian name of calling them crazy bears, I'm going to start doing that.
Crazy bears.
Crazy bear. So, but here's the thing with this: this gives you a whole new explanation for Bigfoot. Maybe the reason Bigfoots are hard to find is the aliens just drop them off every now and then.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're like alien pets. And then you got to let them out to go poop or whatever. So you just drop them off on Earth. Or maybe Earth is like the kennel where you put them when you're going on vacation to Zeta Reticuli. Like, hey, they don't like Zeta Reticuli. They can't. Zeta Reticuli doesn't allow pets.
Oh, they're like boa constrictors and stuff. They're cute when they're little, but at some point they get too big, and the parents are like, "Man, we got to get rid of this thing." So they put it in the station wagon while the kid's at school, and they take it, drop it off on Earth.
Yeah, so maybe so, or maybe a Bigfoot is like a fully it's like an all-terrain vehicle probe.
There you go.
Like maybe they're robotic. I mean, he did eat meat, which makes you think not robotic, but. Who knows if they're being dropped off by these small moon people?
Mm-hmm.
And the weird thing about that one is the Indian claimed that the people that came on the small moon looked in every way human.
Yeah,
but they were just, they had short fitting, which sounds like the Nordics. Before the Greys became the archetypical folklore alien of America, there was the Nordics.
I didn't know that.
Which was about from the 1930s. Well, I know 1940s to 1970s. Everyone saw the Nordics, and the Nordics were these tall, blonde men that came from spaceships, and they would and blonde women, and they would come down, and then the Nordics fell out of favor. Though some people still claim to have encountered the Nordics, and whereas the Greys are always sort of negative and they abduct you in the night, the Nordics would be like, "We have come to teach your people about atomic energy and its dangers, and warn you that if you don't change your path, you are in danger of destroying the planet." And they would speak all, we have come to raise your vibrations to a higher level, or whatever, is what the Nordics would always say.
Cool.
And the Greys would always pull you out of your bedroom and stick things up your butt.
Not as cool.
So, not as cool. But if maybe as we talked about in our Dark Skies interview, maybe the Greys are themselves prisoners of another race. Who knows? But so that's what you have to look forward to in the future Old West. There's going to be, like we said, we have the UFOs coming out now with the government, and everyone, and what I was going and the Old West, right? The return of like lawlessness. But it's just a return to form. It's all trad.
So maybe the government is anticipating that their cover-up operations are going to be interrupted due to lack of funding, and good infrastructure. Yeah. So they have to prepare the people to start seeing UFOs again.
Yeah. And listen, there's going to be a lot more crazy bears.
We're not going to be able to keep this under control for the next few decades.
Coronavirus, riots in the streets.
Yep.
And space big feet.
Yeah.
Future of America.
I mean, that doesn't sound... I don't like rioting.
Right.
But I do like Wild West. I do like society being able to resort itself according to belief systems, so that we can have a chance to live in peaceful, disassociated harmony. And I like space big feet.
I do too.
So it's really I'm really looking forward to the next couple decades.
Someone said being affected by the Kali Yuga is a choice.
Oh, yeah, okay.
You can ride this.
A lot of it's attitudinal.
A lot of attitudinal. And like the guy said, the crazy bears are capable of powerful medicine, so they're probably going to be the cure for coronavirus anyway.
I look forward to meeting my first crazy bear.
No vaccine. I don't get up there like, look, we're not going to have a vaccine. We're all going to do Bigfoot meditations.
Well, apparently we're all going to do the vaccine because they're making it mandatory. I don't know if you read that.
Where at? I knew they did that. They're saying that in Australia.
No, Virginia wants to make it whenever it comes out. They don't even have the thing, and they say they're making it mandatory. Sorry, I know we're just jumping off topic, but I had to mention that so our listeners would be aware that this conversation has in fact started in earnest in the United States.
Yeah, but see, I think this is a thing where they're talking about something that doesn't exist and may never exist.
Right. Yeah, probably. I don't think they'll have. They might try to make a fake one mandatory. Yeah, because they've got to close the loop on this narrative somehow. And so a fake virus panic gets solved by a fake mandatory vaccine program.
Yeah, you have to. That's a good point. That's a good point about knowing about narratives. You have to close the narrative. There has to be an ending.
Right.
Even if it doesn't make any sense. This is why we all should have voted for Marianne Williamson.
No, I'm not voting for a witch. Sorry.
She knew about crystal magic, and she would have had the big crazy bears out there. And she wouldn't try to force a vaccine on anybody. She's listen, no, we just have to all raise our vibrations.
Is she really into crystal magic?
Oh, yeah. There's no woman over the age of 45 that lives on the west side of the Mississippi that isn't into crystal magic.
See, that's why I'm always going to be East Coast.
Yeah. But, it's just what it is.
Yeah.
People on the West Coast believe in crystal magic and like Chinese medicine. Mm-hmm. And people on the East Coast believe in free trade. Both are silly. It's all ridiculous.
Chinese medicine, there's some good stuff in there. There's some hokum too.
There is, yeah. No, there is, yeah. So it's going to be fine. Don't worry, everybody. You get your crazy bear medicine.
If anybody's interested in living in my Appalachian fortified city coming in the next few years, let me know. I'll put you on the list. If you pass this, you got to pass the screening process.
You've been talking about that since you were like 15.
Have I?
As long as I've known you, you've been like, one of the first things you said to me was, I'm thinking about building a compound.
I believe you. I don't remember this, but I do believe you.
I was like, oh, really?
It's going to happen. No, I've set a date now. It's going to happen before I turn 50.
Yeah.
And if I play my cards right, I'll get elected the first mayor.
That was one of the very first things you said to me. Like, I have a compound. I'm extending invitations.
Yeah. Well, I'm still in that phase. 20 years later, I'm still in that stage. I got a little sidetracked for a while, but I'm back on track now.
Yeah. No, I don't.
So more details on that and my rap album will be out shortly. So hey, listener, give us a review on your podcasting platform of your choice. We'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, it has to be a good one. Don't give us a bad one.
No, yeah. Just save the bad ones. Give us the good ones. And we'll catch you next time.
Okay. Peace, love, and chicken grease. Or is it love, peace, and chicken grease? That sounds better.
I don't know what it is.
I don't remember my slang. I wonder if he was doing